Marine and Environmental Affairs officials attempt to save a loggerhead sea turtle off the coast of Sandy Neck. We have details on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Friday, September 9th, 2016.
So Devin,
I'm Sarah
I wanted
Mantle.
to talk with you today. A relatively interesting, kind of sad incident that happened at Millway Beach earlier this week involving a leatherback turtle. So take me through what happened this week when we spotted this leatherback turtle in distress.
Yes, it was definitely a very interesting situation that we came upon. I responded to a call that we had a turtle in distress right off of Millway Beach. So when I got there, I waded out into the water, and I could see that it was visibly in a lot of pain due to some necrotic tissue on its flippers. So what happened next, because I identified it as a leatherback sea turtle, which means it's an endangered species. So that means we have to start the endangered species protocol. So we were told to document and take some footage. So I took lots of videos and lots of pictures and took a GPS coordinate and sent that to the different researchers around the Cape Cod. And then they went ahead and notified federal officials that we had a endangered species in distress, specifically that leatherback sea turtle. So what the federal officials do is they have specific permits that they give out to the different organizations. So if that leatherback had been entangled, visibly wrapped up in fishing line or lobster pots or even mooring lines, then we would have called the Center for Coastal Studies because their permit entails them to come out and help that turtle.
Sure.
But this time we contacted, the New England Aquarium would be the one who came down to respond to that because it wasn't visibly entangled. It was just in distress. But after the vets came down and we helped them get the turtle out of the water and into their van, and then they brought it back up to Quincy where their animal rehab center is, they determined that those wounds were from a previous entanglement. So the line wraps around the flippers, and it eventually will cut off the blood flow. So that's why the tissue was all dying. It was definitely the worst condition I've ever seen any animal in.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah. And looking at the picture, certainly saw the flipper was almost unrecognizable, the level of rotting that had taken place on that tissue. So obviously we're looking at endangered species. How rare is it, Devin, to see a leatherback turtle in the waters in that particular area in Millway on the north side?
So it's definitely rare to see it at Millway. That's a very large animal coming into the harbor. But what's not rare is seeing it at this time of year, very specifically in Cape Cod Bay. So these leatherbacks, they breed down in the Coral Sea, down in the Caribbean, and then they migrate north with the jellyfish because these leatherbacks are really cool. They solely feed on jellies. So right now they are on their way back down from the Arctic and going back down to the Caribbean Sea. So because of the geography of Cape Cod, our hooked arm out into the ocean, a lot of animals can get pushed in. That's why we're kind of a hot spot for strandings.
Sure.
So most likely this turtle got pushed in with that storm, Hurricane Hermine, because he was not moving very fast. We stayed with him for 2 hours, and we made it from Millway down to Bone Hill Road. So, that's not a very far distance.
No,
he was mostly riding the tide.
Sure, and that was what I was going to ask. It didn't seem like it seemed more that he was just kind of floating on the tide than actively swimming.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, aside from the very obvious injury that this turtle had on his flipper, were there other signs that let you know that he was in distress?
So as a field biologist, a marine biologist, what we do is once we see these animals in distress, we kind of just sit down and observe. You just watch it for repetitive movements. I was watching to see if he could dive, if he could go down and swim away from us. He was taking very, very short dives. His buoyancy was pretty off. And I also observed that he was only using that flipper that was almost completely just down to the bone. That was what we continuously saw him trying to move himself with. So once we really observed that, we knew that the other flippers were also damaged. So that, you know, that kind of got us to the point where we assumed that the vets probably wouldn't be able to rehab the small turtle, just because, you know, in most cases, if you have, it's just like a person. If you hurt your arm, you're going to kind of gimp your arm and you're not going to use it.
Right.
Because hopefully you have the other arm to use. And in that case, that's what we would have wanted to see, because these turtles are very resilient. The vets are able to amputate a limb, a flipper, and they can be just fine. They can swim around, and their buoyancy isn't too far off. So we were hoping for that, but, you know, once we observed it on shore and saw the necrotic tissue on the other side, we knew that this turtle will hopefully no longer be suffering for that case.
Sure. So was it a case, and that was, you know, again, another question I had as I was thinking about the story, is that, so it wasn't just that one flipper, was the kind of rotting flesh was moving to the rest of the turtle's body?
Right. So what happened to this girl probably is that she was entangled, and it wrapped around her, kind of the front half of her body. So that first left flipper was probably wrapped the tightest, and that's why it lost the blood flow first. But once we saw the other flipper on land, you could see that it also had wounds around where the, you know, where a lobster pod rope would be wrapped around, you know, that fishing line. So she, you know, the vets will do testing on the tissue and see if there's a specific type of bacteria, you know, an infection that made the wound much worse. You know, that's the most likely case.
So,
you know, it's an infection from an entanglement wound.
Absolutely, and certainly speaks to the dangers of entanglement and the caution that needs to be exercised with fishing line. So, Devin, what is the procedure for removing a 250-pound turtle from the water and getting him up to Quincy? How does that work?
So that's when, you know, the vets come in, because they're the ones who are under that federal permit to handle this endangered species. So our staff, we only assist when the vets are there. So what we do is we have basically a stretcher. It's like a big tarp with handles on the edges, and then there's holes cut in for the flippers, the same thing that we would use for the dolphins as well. So to get the animal on shore, we had just kind of like a belt that was wrapped around his shell, and we slowly put the boat in reverse and just slowly brought him over to shore. And since he wasn't a huge leatherback, you know, she could have been up to 1,500 pounds. But she was very small, you know, probably not eating too much. So we were able to get her onto the stretcher pretty easily. And then there was probably 8 of us, you know, our team, and we had harbor master staff with us as well, and the Wellfleet Mass Audubon guys came down as well, and then obviously the New England Aquarium. So we just kind of hoisted her up, and then with a lot of manpower got her into the back of, you know, like a Chevy, an SUV, essentially, the turtle ambulance. And then they'll bring her up to Quincy and do some serious checkups on her.
Sure. So does this incident, Devin, make you and your colleagues a little more, you know, kind of keeping your eyes a little bit more peeled for other strandings? I know it's a little bit early, but we did have the tropical storm, and you know, certainly we're in that time of year. So are you kind of on alert now, looking for these creatures, or is that just a regular part of your job?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm definitely always on alert. I've been very fortunate to be around and able to respond to different animal strandings with the town. You know, I'm very appreciative of the opportunities I've been able to have. So, yeah, when I'm on shellfish patrol out in Barnstable Harbor, I definitely have my eyes peeled for lots of different things. You never really know what
Well, be sure to tune into our hour-long news program, Barnstable This Morning, weekdays at 8 a.m. On Monday's show, we'll have our Town Manager segment with Town Manager Mark Els. We'll also catch up with Cape Cod Community College Communications Director Michael Gross. Plus, we'll have all the news and information you need. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.